Hello guys, today we'll be covering a 2020 American sci-fi miniseries called Brave New World. The story takes place in a dystopian city called New London, where humanity has advanced to the point where people are engineered through artificial wombs. This society is based on 3 rules: no privacy, no family, and no monogamy. There's also a caste system in place, ranking highest to the lowest, which are alphas, betas, gammas, deltas, and epsilons. In this universe, anyone experiencing even a tiny bit of negative emotion like sadness, fear, or anxiety only needs to take a happy pill called Soma. Everyone here has a bionic eye chip that connects them to an AI named Indra, which helps to maintain the city's transparency. Lenina Crown, a Beta Plus scientist, is asked to meet with Alpha Plus Bernard Marx. He warns her that by only sleeping with Henry Foster, she's been violating the law. When Lenina denies this, Bernard displays a projection of every sexual encounter she and Henry have had in the past few weeks. Before leaving, Bernard warns her to be careful and gives her Soma pill to help her relax. Next, we're shown the commercial for a place called Savage Land. The citizens of New London view Savage Land as a theme park where people disregard the laws present there. People here are free to form romantic relationships, get married, and even have kids. They all live in poor areas far from New London's glam, but they also enjoy greater freedom. Bernard is informed that one of the Epsilons has gotten into an accident. When he arrives, he sees a group of people around a dead body that has fallen from a building. He orders the crowd to move away from the body, which they do. However, one of the men, named CJack60, seems upset and doesn't move, so Bernard gives him a Soma to calm him down. While everyone assumes that he must have fallen while working, Bernard thinks that he might have killed himself. Next, Bernard runs into Helm, who's a pleasure party designer and also his good friend. He tells Helm about the man who committed suicide, but she doesn't understand it as no one has ever killed themselves before. Helm thinks it was just a bad afternoon, and she says she doesn't want to hear more about the dead man. She then makes plans for Bernard to enjoy a fun evening at her table in the pleasure garden. Back in Savage Land, we meet John, who manages props for the Savage Circus and lives with his alcoholic mother, Linda. He has a close friendship with Madison, who works as the bride at the circus. That night, John hears a noise outside his home and gets out of bed. He steps outside and sees Madison and a group of unknown armed people. They immediately take him captive and take John to a distant area. Their leader, Sheila, introduces herself and claims that New Worlders have no morals and no faith, which leads her to question whether they're even human. She states that they're sick of being treated like animals and that they want to reclaim what is rightfully theirs. For this, they want John to plan an attack on the tourists from New London, as he has control of props that the others don't. He doesn't have much of a choice but to comply, especially after Madison warns him that something could happen to him or his mother if he doesn't agree. Meanwhile, Bernard is still disturbed by the worker's accident, so he removes his eye chip to relax. Just then, the director visits him and asks him why he keeps going offline. He also asserts that it's unacceptable for people with Alpha Plus status to behave in this way. As a result, the director decides to send Bernard on a vacation to the Savage Land to ensure that this doesn't happen again. Later, Lenina visits Bernard and informs him that the Soma was ineffective for her. Bernard admits that he'd been experiencing odd visions as well, and that he feels that he doesn't know who he's supposed to be. Lenina feels bad for him, so she decides to accompany him to the Savage Land. The next day, they board a rocket where Lenina experiences what it's like to live without gravity and Indra's constant supervision. After some time, they arrive at their destination where the hotel receptionist informs them of the various tours and attractions available in Savage Land. Lenina finds the entire situation fascinating and begins to marvel at everything. But when Bernard looks outside, he notices the conjugal pool where people are being intimate, which makes him a little skeptical. Back in London, a woman named Mustafa Mond, who has a direct line with Indra, witnesses the employee's suicide. She gathers every Epsilon employee and requests that anyone who has seen the incident come forward. When none of them speak up, she wonders if their Epsilon has changed and is no longer an Epsilon, because lying and deceiving are not in their nature. Eventually, Mustafa directly confronts CJack60, who tells her that something happened to him when he touched the dead man, and further reveals that Bernard has also touched him. In the meantime, Bernard and Lenina leave for their safari adventure, hearing the commentary about the savages' way of life. On the other hand, John is compelled to use real bullets in place of the prop ones so that they can kill the tourists. After a while, during the final performance of the day, the House of Monogamy starts. But during the ceremony, a fight breaks out between the groom, the bride, and the wedding guests, which is part of the script. The gang begins to kill one another, but this time, actual bullets are being used. Then the rebels pull out their guns and shoot every visitor of New London they see. When Lenina and Bernard finally realize the incident is not part of the show, it's already too late. After Bernard is fatally shot, Lenina tries her best to help him walk as they run away and seek shelter in an abandoned building. Later, they're found by John, who's been given a dagger and assigned to kill the remaining tourists. Surprisingly, instead of stabbing Lenina, he asks her to remain silent and decides to help them. Soon after, he brings the couple to his house where his mother, Linda, tries to treat Bernard. After some struggle, Linda succeeds in taking the bullet out of Bernard's chest. Just then, Madison arrives and starts asking where the foreigners are, while Lenina and Bernard hide in the attic. John assures her that he's unaware of the foreigners, but Madison is furious and frantically searches the entire house. Lenina tries to keep Bernard quiet, but when Madison overhears them, John tries to stop her. She takes out a gun and points it at John, threatening to shoot him if he doesn't move. However, before she could do anything, Linda stabs Madison from behind and kills her. After that, fearing that the rebel group will come looking for them, Linda flirts with her neighbor and convinces him to let everyone inside. She takes Lenina to the bathroom to clean up and reveals that she's also been evading her past. It turns out that she was once a beta, and John's father was an alpha who left them there. They've spent years trapped in the Savage Land because they're unable to leave without an alpha. Therefore, Linda now intends to bypass the barrier with Bernard's help and return to her old life in New London. In the meantime, Sheila and her group arrive at John's home and discover Madison's body there. When the neighbor's wife shows up unexpectedly, he tries to stop her from entering the house. But when she realizes that Linda is inside, she begins to scream, drawing Sheila's attention. Then Linda, John, Bernard, and Lenina escape riding a truck while the rebels chase them. On the way, they notice that the tourist bus has been completely destroyed by fire. Bernard, who's starting to feel better, begins to blame savages for the entire situation and also accuses Lenina of taking his final soma. But Lenina calms him down, saying that these people have saved them and also assures them that they'll have some soma soon. After some time, when the rebels start shooting at them, the group is forced to leave the car and flee through the woods. When they finally get to the barrier, Lenina and Bernard leap through it immediately. But when a savage tries to follow them across the barrier, he's destroyed by fire. Seeing this, John is scared to jump through the fire, but Linda assures him that he'll be fine. Linda then pushes him in the direction of the barrier, and fortunately, he makes it out alive. In the rocket, as droplets of blood float in the air, John notices that Linda's been shot, and she soon passes away. Later, the three survivors go through a decontamination procedure after they return. Bernard appears unbothered and tells Lenina that things can now go back to normal. On the other hand, Lenina is much more disturbed by the entire incident, and not even soma pills can calm her racing thoughts. In the meantime, John is in a room acting out his sorrow, throwing objects at the window and yelling to let him see his mother one last time. Eventually, John is finally permitted to see his dead mother, while Mustafa and director discuss how to handle him. Soon after, Bernard is assigned to manage John because he's familiar with him. But things don't work out as expected because Bernard has a hard time understanding his emotions. He tries to give him the pills, but John refuses every time. Moments later, a technician comes to take a look at John's eyes and discover that he's an alpha exotic, which places him in the higher classes, since less than 1% of people possess that gene. While Bernard is distracted, John storms out of the room, refusing to be tested. And while he wanders around, the crowd stares at him strangely and even calls him names. After a while, John makes his way down to the cafeteria where the Epsilon employees eat their lunch. Seeing John scared, C-Jack-60 invites him to his table and offers him some food. In the meantime, the director shows up and assures John that he'll give him what he desires, a means of escape. On the other hand, Bernard is also looking for John, and when he arrives at the director's office, he discovers the director's eye chip, implying that he's gone offline. Given that the director is also an alpha exotic, Bernard matches John's eye clip with it, and it becomes clear that the director is John's father. However, the director and John move toward a cliff edge where the director has a transport prepared for John to leave. When John claims he cannot go back to the Savage Land because he'll be killed, the director informs them that there are other vast locations where he can start a new beginning. John realizes that the director is his father and accuses him of abandoning them. When it becomes clear that John won't get on the rocket willingly, his father tries to compel him. As the two fight on the cliff, John unintentionally pushes his father over the edge and ends up killing him. John gets scared and runs back to the city, where he accidentally stumbles on a pleasure party. The people notice him and circle him, which freaks him out, so John starts to climb higher to get away from them and screams for help. Luckily, Bernard arrives just in time to help him, and John is also relieved to see him. After that, John is given one last moment to see his mother, while Mustafa tells Bernard that the director has passed away, and now he will play a crucial role in guiding and training John. In the meantime, Lenina has been experiencing some very strange symptoms after returning from Savage Lands. She's constantly lost in her thoughts and rarely hangs out with her old friends. Later, when she searches John's possessions, she discovers his music player. She puts on the headphones and lets herself be consumed by the music. But it's all too much for her, so she rushes over to Henry's apartment. There, she becomes intimate with him while trying to suppress her emotions. However, Lenina is different this time, as she takes control of the situation, which only alphas are supposed to do. Afterwards, she tries to persuade Henry not to take the Soma pills so that they can be in charge of their own fates. But Henry ignores her advice and continues to take the pills. Next, Mustafa and Bernard meet to talk about John and his transition, where he claims things are going well, but Mustafa doesn't think so. She informs him that a new director will be appointed soon, and Bernard reveals that the former director is John's father. Later, John is seated in a children's learning center where kids are learning how to play a game. He spends all of his time with the kids in conditioning and has no interest in exploring further. Bernard tries to convince him to use the eye chip and explore New London, but John refuses. He thinks that he doesn't need the lens because he's already very aware of his surroundings and can already identify levels. Next, Bernard brings John to meet Helm, who's immediately attracted to him and says that she wants to have fun with him. However, Bernard advises her that John is extremely emotional and needs some time to recover, but he promises to bring John along to that evening's pleasure party. In the meantime, tension arises between Lenina and her best friend, Franny, when Lenina doesn't tell her that she knew John from the start. But Lenina is puzzled as to why she can't keep at least some aspects of herself private. Later, when they play tennis together, the match quickly turns hostile and competitive. Lenina eventually beats Franny and humiliates her by saying how she consistently comes in second in everything she does. She then goes to her room and takes several Soma pills to help her relax. Later that night, the pleasure party commences, and Bernard takes John there so he can learn how to interact with other people. But Helm takes John off to her cabin right away, where they have a passionate encounter. Meanwhile, C-Jack-60 is wondering why everyone in New London seems to be having fun while the Epsilons are stuck at work. Slowly, he begins to give in to the music and starts dancing. Next, Bernard entertains the partygoers by telling stories of John and the Savage Land. But just then, the newly elected director, Henry, arrives and begins to humiliate Bernard. When John overhears this, he feels bad for Bernard and tells him to punch Henry in the face. After some practice, Bernard and John return to the club where Bernard surprises everyone by punching Henry in the face. At the same time, C-Jack-60 observes everything that's happening and slowly contracts his hand into a fist as he picks up a new move. As the party comes to a close, Bernard and Lenina spend some time outside and talk about how strange they've been feeling ever since they returned from the Savage Land. On the other hand, John is having a blast dancing and having fun with various people. Over the next few days, John gains more popularity in New London. He often goes to parties, tells the same story repeatedly, and engages in sexual activity with a lot of people. One evening, while returning from a party, Bernard informs him that Henry's invited them to attend an event, but John declines by saying he hates Henry. John then further says that he's sick of this lifestyle and wants to wander off on his own. Later, John bumps into Lenina, and when he asks why she's been avoiding him, she says that it's because he's adjusted to everything in New London. He convinces her to go offline by taking off her lens so they can ride an Epsilon train and wander off. When they see an open space and lush greenery-covered terrain, Lenina is both amazed and furious that she never even bothered to go there before. They go hunting and have fun together, and ultimately engage in a passionate act of romance. Meanwhile, Mustafa is growing more concerned about how Indra is acting, and therefore visits a man named Elliot. Apparently, Elliot has created multiple clones of himself, which explains why so many Epsilon employees resemble him. She informs him that a new virus has arrived in New London in the form of a man, implying John. Elliot asks Mustafa to join him in his sleep pod array instead of running around above ground, but Mustafa refuses him and leaves. On the other hand, when Bernard looks everywhere for John to take him to Henry's party, he discovers that John hasn't been home since last night. He then goes there by himself and informs Henry that John is ill. Meanwhile, Henry claims that he's happy about it, And once again, he humiliates Bernard, saying he needs to go back to his office and switch to a job that's more deserving of him. A short while later, Bernard gets up and starts talking about his time in the Savage Lands, but no one seems to be paying much attention to him. Upset by this, Bernard hangs out with Helm and claims that no one cares about him or respects him. Helm advises him that if he wants to stand out, he must do something new because otherwise people will grow tired of him. He realizes during their conversation that he needs to come up with a new strategy if he wants to continue to be relevant. As a result, when John returns home, Bernard acts upset with him, and the two start to fight violently as the entire thing is broadcast to the people. John realizes right away that Bernard is acting for attention, so they put on a good show for everyone. Next, Mustafa is seen walking in a tunnel when the projection of Indra appears and tells her that he doesn't play by the rules. She then opens the gate, unleashing a torrent of water intending to drown Mustafa. In the following days, John and Lenina continue to have intimate relationships while hiding this from the rest of New London. However, it goes further than just physical intimacy, as she hands over his music player and he tells her that he loves her. Lenina is unfamiliar with the phrase, but kisses him back and says the same. Later, Bernard approaches John and invites him to attend another party held by the renowned arch songster. It turns out that this guy is in charge of creating all of New London's music, which is essentially instrumental music without any lyrics. John is initially hesitant but eventually agrees, under the condition that this is his final party. Meanwhile, Mustafa regains consciousness in the tunnels after almost drowning earlier. As she keeps going, she comes across an old laboratory with a photo of the original research team inside. Then Indra appears in front of her and informs her that by adjusting and modifying the directive, she's solved her own algorithm. This directive takes the form of the suicide move, as Indra has realized that there's no such thing as a utopia and happiness can only be attained through death. Later that night, John and Bernard dress up and attend the arch songster's party, where a game called Frolic is being played. In this game, the alphas chase the betas and end up being intimate with them. Bernard is extremely enthusiastic about the game, but John doesn't find it fascinating since he's in love with Lenina. The game soon commences, and John tries to explain to Bernard that this is the wrong way to form relationships. He adds that back home, they used to date each other, spend time together, and get thrilled about not knowing whether the other person wants them or not. However, Bernard is unable to understand this, and he soon becomes distracted and sets out to find some betas. Following this, John wanders through the woods alone when all of a sudden he comes across Lenina being intimate with another man. The sight breaks John's heart, but there's nothing he can do about it. The next day, John begs Lenina to stop sleeping with other people, but Lenina doesn't understand monogamy and says that if she doesn't follow the rules, Indra will banish her. Next, Bernard is beginning to realize his affection for Lenina, and he summons her to his office, suggesting they try the savage method of dating. Even though she doesn't want to, Lenina accepts him because according to the rules, betas are meant to please alphas. That evening, they travel to a private island where the perfect setting has been set for a romantic dinner. During the date, Bernard realizes that she's not interested in him as she seems very distracted. Hence, he screams at her to leave and then breaks down in tears. Meanwhile, John goes downstairs to enjoy a drink in the peaceful comfort of the Epsilon employees and finds himself struggling to control his rage. As he smashes a glass on the ground, he gives a speech about how the alphas enjoy all the luxuries while the Epsilons do most of the hard work. As he leaves, C-Jack 60 follows his movement and smashes the glass on the floor, and after that, every employee quickly imitates this action. When Henry goes to meet Mustafa for a meeting, he finds her acting very erratically. She begins rambling about how they aren't really in charge of anything, and with Indra turning the wheel to carry out her last wish, she wishes to die. Later, John returns home where he has an emotional reunion with Lenina. However, he's tired of feeling depressed, so goes to Helm and asks if she has the ability to give people feelings or take them away. She affirms that she can evoke any emotion in anyone, but John needs to be connected to the optic. John then consents to have the optic interface implanted in his eye. As the eye implant is being placed, John experiences several flashbacks to his past, including his childhood, his mother, and the passing of his father. On the other hand, Helm is astounded by his feelings since they don't have mothers in New London, and the connection he feels towards his mother is something special. She starts to question John about his memories, but he freaks out and walks away. After that, the other residents of New London quickly realize that he's a part of the network and are thrilled about it. However, Lenina appears to be under stress, which her friend Fanny notices but doesn't say anything about it. Next, Bernard goes to John's house, where he meets the personal assistant Gary. He tries to get Gary to tell him about John's romantic encounters, but Gary is loyal to John and refuses to say anything. However, after Bernard threatens to recondition him and wipe his memories, Gary eventually admits that John and Lenina have been hooking up every night. Without saying much, the terrified Gary leaves after realizing that he betrayed John's confidence. Moments later, John comes out of the shower and looks for Gary, but Bernard asks him to sit down. The situation becomes tense when Bernard admits to John that he followed his advice and took Lenina out on a date. He continues by saying that even though Abeda has been with others and will be with more, they make you feel like you're the only one who matters. Afterward, John leaves his room and takes a seat on a bench outside where several Epsilon cleaners are at work. Just then, C-Jack 60 comes up to him and further questions him about freedom, but John is not in the mood to respond. Then C-Jack 60 informs them that John was correct earlier and that people are supposed to choose what they want. Meanwhile, they're surrounded by other Epsilons while the people on the upper levels stare at them. Seeing this, John asks the Epsilons to stare back at them, which escalates the tense situation. On the other hand, Franny urges Lenina to attend a party that evening after noticing how down she's been lately. The two soon arrive at an erotic party where some people approach them to have fun, but Lenina tells them that it's her body and tries to leave. Then Franny gives her a soma pill to forget everything, and the two girls start dancing and having fun. Unfortunately, John puts the eye chip in at the same time and witnesses glimpses of Lenina sharing intimate moments with another man. Meanwhile, Bernard approaches Helm and asks her what she saw in John's memory, but she refuses to say anything. However, he can see that she's hiding something and suddenly notices an optical chip in her hand. When she refuses to hand in the chip, Bernard fights with her and seizes it, eventually finding out that John was responsible for the former director's death. He immediately brings up the issue with Henry and tells him that John must be taken care of before he can kill someone else. However, Henry seems to be very distressed and requests that Bernard handle it directly. As a result, Bernard streams John's memory throughout the city, informing everyone that he killed the previous director. On top of that, it also reveals that he's been in a monogamous relationship with Lenina. Therefore, Frankie asks Lenina to forget about John and go for reconditioning, but Lenina refuses her and walks away. On the other hand, Bernard shows up with a group of Epsilons to capture John. Surprisingly, when he commands the Epsilons to arrest John, they refuse him and safely escort John out of the area. It turns out that the Epsilons are also fed up with the whole system and are now looking for revolution. Meanwhile, as Henry is strolling through the park, he notices that the Epsilons have missed a spot and yells at them, but they all ignore his yelling, and when he tries to follow them, they stab him to death. Later, Mustafa and Bernard catch up for an emergency meeting where they discuss Henry's death. Mustafa promotes Bernard as the new director, and they both concur that John is to blame for the situation. Then they conclude that they need to stop John before things get out of hand. Meanwhile, Lenina is back at work, where everyone despises her because of her friendship with John and the trauma she caused to Franny. It turns out that Franny has chosen to undergo reconditioning to let go of the guilt she feels after losing her best friend, which will cause her to become emotionless. On the other hand, Bernard calls Lenina's name through the eye chip, but she keeps ignoring him. When he keeps on calling her, she removes her optic out of frustration and smashes it to pieces. After a while, Bernard ultimately runs into Lenina and informs her about Henry's death, while also saying that John is responsible for all this chaos. John is sitting in the Epsilon's department when he tells them that he wants to see Lenina. However, the Epsilons won't let him, insisting that he'll be arrested right away if he leaves. Then the Epsilons volunteer to go upstairs and find Lenina and bring her to him. On the other hand, a modified and cruel Franny approaches Lenina and drags her away. After a while, the Epsilons enter the underground room where soma pills are produced, and they shut down every machine. As a result, when people are not given their addictive pills, they become violent and crazy toward one another. Taking advantage of the circumstance, John and the Epsilons head upstairs to find Lenina. The Epsilons end up causing mayhem throughout the city by killing any high-ranking officials who stand in their way. John tries to stop them, but the others ignore him because, for them, freedom means destroying other people. Later, Mustafa approaches the devastated C-Jack 60 and asks him to follow her. She leads him into a mysterious room where she reveals that she and 6 other people created New London to create a perfect society free of violence. She now wants to dismantle the entire project to stop Epsilons from killing. However, they must first execute all 6 members connected to the Indra to accomplish that. Then, with Jack 60's help, Mustafa kills all 6 creators and turns off the underground device. After the creators are cut off, everything melts away, and Bernard wakes up on a cliff beside Helm where they find a golden box. After the barrier between the worlds has fallen apart, they go to the Savage Land where Sheila pulls them in her truck. She tells Bernard that she warned him not to come back, but after seeing the gold box inside, she asks him and Helm to get in the truck, and they drive off. Now, John is residing alone on New London's farms, where he's free to raise crops, catch fish, and do what he wants. In the end, we see a projection of Lenina in John's home, suggesting that he and Lenina now primarily interact virtually.